Hello and welcome to the PMP Test and the process. My name is Juan Martinez. If you have any questions about the slides, feel free to contact me at yourpmpinstructor@gmail.com. During this lesson, we're going to be learning about what it takes to submit your application, take your test, how to keep your PMP certification, and some of the pitfalls that have been recommended by other students as to consider when taking their PMP exam. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at yourpmpinstructor@gmail.com. Let's begin. In order for you to get your PMP certification credential, you have to follow all these steps on the screen. It all begins with the application submission. My personal opinion is that if you're going to do your PMP and you think you're going to begin by taking all the study material you've purchased or borrowed and study that and then do the application, I think you've got the cart before the horse. Really, what I recommend to you is that you begin by doing your application first. The reason is this could take a while. It could take you anywhere from a couple of hours if you're really lucky, all the way up to, I have some students that have said it's taken them 3-4 months to do it, only because they get sidetracked and sometimes it's a little intimidating. But I wouldn't recommend studying at all until you finish your application. So let's begin by looking at what it takes to submit your application. Let's begin our application by logging on to www.pmi.org. And then I'm already logged in. I created an account, a fake account, to show you this tutorial here. And when you go here, you'll either have log in or create account. So you'll have to address that issue. If you don't have an account already, obviously you'll have to create one using this button here. Once you're logged in, then you go over here to certifications and you can see what types of certifications PMI has available. You can download the brochure to see which certification is available or which one meets your needs, but most of the students that I deal with focus on this corner here, Project Management Professional Certification. This is the Certified Associate in Project Management is someone that would be probably like a college student, someone with very little experience, certainly no one in this room. And the PGMP is focused more like the SPO director or the PEO. And out of all the people I've ever met in my life, I've only met 2 PGMPs in thousands of PMPs. And then down here are the other ones that PMI are willing to certify you in. But for the scope of this lesson, we're going right here to the Project Management Professional Certification. Once you click on that, you can download the PMP handbook here in this tab, and it's got everything that you're going to see in the presentation that I'm giving you. So you can download that handbook for future reference. But when you're ready to apply, you click on this button here, and it's going to take you to another screen that will ask you to make sure that you're applying for the correct one. Mine says continue working on a PMP application because I've already clicked it before. If I hadn't clicked it before, it would say apply for PMP credential. So I'll click on this. And here's all the information that I recommend you have in front of you before you start doing your application. You're going to need your contact address, your contact information, and that also means people, like prior bosses that you're using as part of the application. Attained education, which means where did you go to school? Not only that, but where is the physical address of your college? That's why I say you should have that information in front of you before you begin. Also, what is the exact name of your degree? You can't just name it. Like, for example, if you think you have an HR degree, you can't just say HR. You got to look at your transcripts and see, does it say business and HR or whatever? That's what they're looking for on the application. Under requirements, you're going to fill out the requirements. Let's click on that one and see if I can get to it. What they're looking for here is project management experience. So if you have a 4-year degree, you need at least 3 years, 36 months of project management experience. And in that at least 36 months, you need to have at least 4,500 hours. Keeping in mind that a typical work year has about 2,000 hours in it, you can get about 6,000 hours out of 3 years. But I recommend stretching it out a little further, maybe going 4 or 5 years and claiming only 1,000 or 1,500 hours, because we know you took leave, we know you had other things that you had to do within that time frame. If you don't have a 4-year degree, such as a high school diploma or an associate's degree, then you need 5 years of project management experience with 7,500 hours of project management specific training. So most of the people that we deal with fall into the first category of a 4-year degree. Furthermore, you're going to have to show them that you have at least 35 contact hours of project management education, and the class that you took this week accounts for that. Also, any other AFIT classes you may have taken, or any DAU classes that you may have taken within the project management discipline. And that could also mean systems engineering, that could also mean contracting, that could also mean business and analysis. So any of those things, as long as it adds up to 35 hours, that's all they really care about. Once you have the requirements met, then we're going to have to fill out the eligibility worksheet, and that's where a lot of students have a little bit of issue. When you go to the eligibility worksheet, it'll bring you up to this screen where it's going to ask you to demonstrate that you have at least 36 months of project management experience, and that you have at least 4,500 hours of project management experience and 35 hours of project management education. So let's take a look at what they're looking at here for PM experience. You're going to have to go in here and demonstrate the 4,500 hours, so we're going to add. When you add, what happens here is that you're going to have to go in there and list the project title. If you've been an Air Force project manager the whole time, you can just put Air Force projects or Air Force munitions project or whatever it is you want to say. Keep it simple. And then you're going to have to put a start date in here. Depends on when you started, what month. And let's say I started this project, I've been doing it since 2012 until today. So let's assume that we started May and we ended May. And then I'm going to put in here my my role and then what industry I was in. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to have to go in there and put in the details of the organization where I worked at. So you're going to have to put in here, I work for Eglin Air Force Base, or I was the PM for Space and Technology Project Manager, let's say, and the organization name was maybe Eglin Air Force Base. And then the country, they want to know what country is, so you're going to put in there United States, United States, right there. And then you're going to have to get the actual physical address of where you work and everything else. Once you do that, you push Save and Continue. And then they're going to want a contact name. When you put a contact name in here, remember to use the person that actually saw you do the work. So if I want to put in here Sue Bailey, which of course I made up, and then the relationship, I'm going to say she was my manager, and her email was sb@www.hh.com. And I'm going to put her phone number, and then I'll save it. Once you get into this area, once you put in Sue Bailey's information or your contact information, they're going to break it out into the domain area. So they're going to want to know, specifically speaking, on that project, how many hours did you spend in the initiating portion of a project? So they're going to ask you to put the information in here. Now, a lot of you, matter of fact, nobody in this room tracked their hours this aggressively, but this is what I recommend to you. Just take a step back and think about the job you had, and think about how much time, percentage-wise, you had initiating. And let's say that you come up with 5% of your entire 3 or 4 or 5 year project or 2-year project working for this lady or this person was spent there. So you put 5% down. And then you spend 20% in planning, and then 30%. So that's 55. And now you spend 30% in controlling. That's 85. So that leaves 15% in closing. If we can agree that you spent, let's just say, 1,000 hours a year on this particular project, then you take those percentages based off of the 1,000 hours. So you would give yourself 5% of the total 1,000 hours per year. So if you did it for 3 years, that's 3,000 hours. 3 years times 5% is 150 hours. So I would go in here and I would put in 150. Then we said 20% of the 3,000, so that's 600. And we would continue going down that path until we filled it all out for that project. Once you have all these done, then you hit Save and Continue. Now, students often ask me, do I have to have something in all these areas? And my response is, within all the projects that you list, yes, you should have them all in all the areas. I would have a hard time believing that you didn't do at least 1% of initiating. It would be very difficult to explain to us that you never identified new stakeholders, or that you never helped create a project charter that includes an ICD or working on such a document. If you tell me you've never spent time in planning, then we have a problem right there, because you should spend on most of your time in planning. If you didn't spend in execution, there's a big problem there. Monitoring and controlling is a little tougher because people often relate that to working in an air logistics complex, tracking metrics. But if you remember, monitoring and controlling also includes things such as setting up metrics for your own current project. If you deliver something and then the user said you got 99.5% of operational availability, that means you were tracking data. So that's part of monitoring and controlling. And then closing. Closing means you gave something to a user. They accepted your item. You signed a DD Form 250. You terminated a contract. You had negotiations with the contractor to make sure that you got everything from a contract. That is how PMI looks at that. And once you have all that information, then you hit click and submit here, save and continue. And once you have the hours, they go through it. Let's see if it's going to give me something here. And start putting in the textual description of what we did for that project. So when you go in here, you see you only have a maximum of 550 words that you can type in there. So basically you type in there whatever it is that you want that's going to describe your project to PMI in the event that you get audited. And then apparently it's going to make you go all the way to 550 counts. Let's see. There we go. It wants a minimum. So it wants a minimum of 300 before it turns to green down here. And then you push save. And now you could see that it's already deducted 750 hours from my 4,500, which means that I still need 3,750 hours. So I push save and continue and do that for an additional project. Once you've done that for all your additional projects and you have got all the information they're requiring, such like right now they're asking for education, you put in the certificate for this class or any other AFIC class or DAU class, and you push save and continue, and then when you're done, then you're complete and you submit your application. So that's how you do the application. Now that you've seen what it takes to submit your application, let's look at a couple of pitfalls that get students with the application completeness and review process. When I demonstrated to you when you're filling out the application about your complete work history, one very big recommendation that I'm going to give you is to use information that you can easily find on work history or your docs, such as your position descriptions or your OPRs or your EPRs, things like that. So make sure that you use words and phrases that come directly out of some sort of sourcing document. For example, OPRs, decorations, letters that you may have on file, something like that. Because that way, in the event that you get audited, you can just pull out that documentation and remind whomever is going to sign your audit piece of paper or documentation that you have actually done it. And I do recommend very strongly that you have unofficial copies of those transcripts showing what education you have, because if you get audited, they will, or PMI will, accept unofficial copies for supporting documentation. Remember, when you're filling in your 4,500 hours, just meet the requirement. There's no need to demonstrate that you have 18 years of project management experience and 10,000 hours of project management experience, because PMI doesn't care. The problem with that is, if you put in there 18 years of experience and you get audited, you have to prove all 18 years. That's why I'm recommending to you that you only use your last 4, 5, or 6 years and just leave it at that. Use the minimum. Don't go overboard. And lastly, when you're looking for professional project management education, remember what I told you in the application process. They take any AFIT, DAU education that you've already done. Don't go out and go get a bunch more education. You've already got it. As long as it's about 3 years or so old, you should be fine. The PMI is pretty lenient on that. and pretty much takes whatever you submit. Now you have your application done, you've submitted it, it's complete, you've taken information only from source documents, and now we get to the part that PMI really cares about, and that is the payment process. A lot of students tell me that they've completed the application, and then I'm excited for them to share in their excitement and their experiences, but I ask them, did you pay? And they say, no, I haven't paid my $555 or whatever the testing fee is that particular time. So then I have to remind them, if you did not pay, PMI has not accepted your application. What happens is you'll get a response back that says, congratulations, we've accepted your application. And that's very similar to going to one of these dirt lot kind of car salesman places where they have a sign that says all applications accepted, but that doesn't mean it's been approved. They only take the time to approve applications after the payment has been made. So complete your application and go ahead and fork out the bucks and pay. Speaking of which, let's talk about paying for this thing. I'm going to recommend to you that you budget $1,000 for the test. A lot of students cringe here because they think that $1,000 for a test is expensive, but I want to remind you that for those of you that have a bachelor's degree, that costs at least $40,000, and for those of you that have a master's degree, that costs another $40,000. So when it comes to investing $1,000 in your education, it's hard to prove that you're going to find a better value than the PMP certification or another certifying body for that matter. The reason I say budget $1,000 is if you are a member of the PMI, it costs $405 for your test. That also means that you've paid $129 to be a member. So if you pay the $405 and the $129, it saves you about $20 because if you are not a member, it costs $555 to take the exam. Which reminds me, when you become a member of PMI for the $129 for the first year, every year after that it's $119. And then if you want to be a local member, it's another $10 to $60 to become a local member of your local organization in your town. Students ask me, do I have to become a member to take the exam? The answer is no. You'll just pay a slightly higher cost up front and also to renew. But as a mentor in your project management world, it is important to consider being a member of external organizations and that we should be looking at other professional organizations, and PMI is one of many to choose from. Once you've paid the dollars and you hit send, you're going to get one of two emails back. You're going to get one that says, congratulations, here's a control number. Go ahead and sign up for your test by following the instructions on this email. Or the other email, the one that says you've been audited. If you've been audited at that point, they're going to send you another email and ask you to prove that you actually have all the experience and credentials that you say you have. So let's take a look at some of the things involved with the audit. If your application is selected to be audited, my research shows, looking at some online websites, that about 15% of people get randomly audited. If you get audited, what happens is they want you to send all their stuff back to them whenever you get it. Now, you have 90 days to send them back the information they requested, and then they have 5 to 7 days to respond to see if they need anything else or if they believe you. Remember during the time I told you when you're filling out your application that you should consider having that documentation in front of you? This is where it becomes really important, because if you had those career briefs in front of you like I recommended, or the copies of your transcripts, or signatures from supervisors such as on OPRs and medals and stuff like that, and all those letters of training that you've had from other institutes, if you have that all in front of you, it is really just one signature from someone who believes you, such as your immediate supervisor, to sign one piece of paper, put it all in an envelope, seal the envelope, and then sign the back of the sealed envelope. Yes, it sounds like some kind of high security crypto stuff here, but that's what PMI wants you to do. Several signatures. And people say, well, do I have to get my old bosses that saw me do the work? And the answer is no. You just need one signature from someone who believes that you did what you say you did. And that's why it's very important that you take my recommendation and you use things from source documents such as medals, awards, OPRs, position descriptions, all that stuff. Because in the event that you get audited, you don't have to track down Colonel Snuffy, who's been retired for 3 years and moved to Bermuda. So that's why having that information in front of you and using only things from source documents really comes in handy. So now that you've gotten through the audit process, now let's talk about exam eligibility. I recommend to you that you have at least another 40 to 50 hours of studying outside of IPM 350. That means that you're going to need to read that PMBOK. That means that you're going to have to take practice exams. If you go on the Air Force portal, there's a link that says e-training on the left-hand side. When you go to e-training, you go to a website called Skillport. When you go to Skillport, you can search PMP exam test, practice tests, or things like that, and a lot of stuff is on there for free if you have a CAC. So again, Air Force portal, e-training, and then you'll see Skillport. So go through there. One thing I'm going to recommend to you is don't tell anyone when you're taking the exam. Don't tell your spouse, your friends, your coworkers, no one, because that adds extra pressure that you just don't need. People tell me that they don't want to let people down. Well, the only person you have to let down is yourself. And if you studied well, like I recommended, you're not going to fail. However, I've heard students tell me that they had people depending on them to give them information, and then when they walk in the office the next day, the first question out of their mouth is, how'd you do on the exam? You don't need that kind of pressure. Take a leave. Military people, don't go ask your boss for a half a day off so you can go take your exam. Just take the day of leave and don't tell anybody that you're taking the exam. That should take some of the pressure off. And also the other piece of pressure was the $1,000. The retake, in case you don't pass it the first time, is about $250, which we'll cover in a couple of slides, $275. But if you budget $1,000, you'll have 3 shots at taking that exam. And I don't know anyone who didn't pass it the second time. So it really can be a stress release if you don't tell anybody when you're taking the exam, and you save $1,000 for this big credentialing professional step of yours. So once you go ahead and you pay for the exam, you've prepared for it, everything is working out for you, let's talk about what else you should do. So one of the things you need to keep in mind is that PMI has to go through a process to prove that they are a professional organization. So they're going to make sure your application is legitimate, and then they're going to make you take a test at a Prometric center. Usually they're attached to Sylvan Learning Centers. A lot of students ask me, can I take it at the base education office? The answer is no. You have to go off base to take this exam. This exam is 4 hours long, it's timed, and it's 200 multiple choice questions. Students often ask me, what's the lowest score I can take to pass exam? And the answer I always tell them is 100. And the reason is PMI doesn't publish their passing exams rates, so the best thing to do is just score 100, and that way you know you'll pass. However, that seems a little bit sarcastic because you really can't study to get 100, so then the best answer I can really give you is, if you're scoring in the 80s during your practice test, you're probably doing just fine. You are allowed to take up to 2 retakes within the same year, and those retakes cost $375 if you are not a member of PMI, or $275 if you are a member. So again, focus, take this exam, and don't make this stuff be any more difficult than it needs to be. You can do it. As I mentioned before, this test is 200 questions, multiple choice. It takes you 4 hours, or they'll give you 4 hours to take this exam. Very strong recommendation I have is every 50 minutes, kind of stop what you're doing and go outside, take a break there in the little lobby area. Students say, well, they didn't tell me I could take breaks. Well, I'm telling you now that you have to self-motivate yourself to take the test, and you have to self-motivate yourself to take your breaks. So when you go in there, about every 50 minutes, you should be taking a break. I've already told you that the exam costs $405 or $555, and I've been told by students that the first 40 questions will scare you. As a matter of fact, when I took the test the first time, I was wondering where in the world they pulled out the first 20 or so questions. But students have told me it can go all the way up to 40. Just relax. Go through there, and you can bookmark them. The test is electronically. It's done on a computer. You can click the bookmark button and come back to them once you feel the rhythm of how the test is written. Once you feel the rhythm of how the test is written, you can go back and take a look at the answers you've already done. Of those 200 questions, 25 of them don't even count towards your final score. They're called pre-release questions. And those pre-release questions are there to see if they're going to be usable for the next round of PMI questions. Those are not counted against you. The bad thing is they don't tell you which ones they are. They don't bold them, they don't underline them or anything like that. So you have to treat each question as if it's a real question and answer the best of your ability. This examination is not based solely off the PMBOK. It is based off of real-world scenarios. If you look at the cover of your PMBOK, it clearly says the guide, G-U-I-D-E, the guide to the project management body of knowledge. That project management body of knowledge is warehoused all over the world in libraries and also on the PMI website. That book represents the executive summary of thousands and thousands of books and articles and journals that have been written in the project management discipline. And PMI writes that PMBOK just to give you basically the tip of the iceberg of what kind of information is out there. The bad thing is that test can come from anywhere. So if you study what you learn in IPM 350, you have a huge leg up. And again, as I mentioned before, keep taking practice tests. You can buy practice tests. You can rent practice tests. You can go on Air Force Portal. You can go on Quizlet. You can go on YouTube. You can learn everything you want. But remember, stay focused. Stay focused on what you study. You can't read everything. So really study those things that you don't have that you really need some help on. When you go take that test, make sure you bring 2 forms of identification in that letter you got that says that when your test is actually going to happen. So bring that PMI letter to that Prometric location. Before you take your exam, you're going to have 15 minutes of uninterrupted time for you to go over and get acclimated with your computer and the room. You're going to sit in a little cubicle, and the young lady or young man will start your computer out, and you'll have a timer that runs down from 15 minutes down to 0. Don't worry about it. When it goes to 0, your test will automatically start. It's not like your appointment's over. So relax. What I want you to do during that 15 minutes is I want you to dump everything that's in your brain, such as math formulas, definitions, people, key people, Six Sigma, anything that you want to write down before you take the exam. And the reason is, when you do that, what happens is you don't have to waste time during the exam recreating all that information. So you have 15 minutes. They do give you scratch paper along with pencils. So dump everything you have out of your memory onto that piece of paper. Then, if you have time, go through the tutorial. The tutorial is really basic. It says things such as, hey, thanks for signing up with Prometric. If you want to choose A as your answer, click the radio button to the left of the A. Let's practice a few times. What color is the sky? Blue, gingham, whatever. You know, they want you to practice taking the exam. You don't need to waste time on that. Dump all your information on the scratch paper they gave you, and then if you have any time, go back to that. One thing to keep in mind is when you're done, you need to make sure you answer all the questions. Every question counts. So you might as well guess at the ones you have no clue about, because they will be counted against you no matter what. Unless, of course, you get it right. So which questions do you have to get right? Well, let's talk about where exactly all these numbers fall in. What's the most important ones to know? So if you look at the chart here, you'll notice that initiating has 13% of all the test questions buried within it. And then planning, 24%. Executing, 30%. Monitoring, controlling, 25%. And initiating, 8%. Students ask me, do you have to pass all areas in order to pass the exam? And the answer from my research is no. You might actually be able to fail 2 sections, initiating and closing. Both of them don't even add up to planning. But keep in mind that initiating only has 2 processes. So all your test questions are coming from 2 processes under initiating. And closing only has 2 processes within that 8%. So you're really looking at low-hanging fruit here that within 4 processes lie 21% of your test questions. By the way, coincidentally, students that have taken IPM 350 have told me that they did worse in initiating and closing than the other sections. And I asked them why, and they said probably because I didn't study it as much, because I thought it would be easy. Well, don't take them 2 sections for granted. Try to do good in all of them, because it's nice to have that security blanket if needed. When you're taking your exam, here's some of the things students have come back and told me. This is what students have said when they returned. They wanted me to make sure every student that comes through IPM 350 sees. First thing, schedule your test during the week. Students say during the weekends, it's full of people. Everybody who couldn't take time off during the week is in there taking CPA exams, PMP exams, Six Sigma exams, everything else. So if you go during the week, chances are you won't have to deal with everyone there. Also, verify what address and location you're going to. I actually had a student go to a secondary Prometric site in town. They got there about 20 minutes early, and the lady behind the counter said, sorry, you're at the wrong place. So he had to get back in his car and drive all the way across town, and that just messed with his brain a little bit. He still passed, but it really got him off kilter there for a little bit in that morning because he thought he wasn't going to be able to take the exam. So make sure you verify where you're at. Even recommend driving there the day before to make sure you know where you're going. Try to get a good night's sleep. Students often say, I couldn't sleep a wink. I'm telling you, it's just an exam. Relax. You've taken 1,000 of them. When you're in there, try to wear comfortable clothes and dress in layers. Sometimes the room is hot, the room is cold, but if you dress in layers, you can adjust as necessary. Try to arrive a few minutes late. Excuse me, try to arrive a few minutes early. And they issued me a locker when I took my exam, and in there I put a bottle of Red Bull, a bottle of water, and some crackers, but I did not put my phone in there. I left the phone in the car. The reason is you leave your phone in the car because if somebody's phone goes off, and I have an iPhone, a lot of people have iPhones, and we all have the same ringtone. The last thing you want is your phone going off in a locker, and you're not know if it's yours or not. But if you leave it in your car, that's an issue you won't have to deal with. Try to eat before you go, and I took the snacks like I told you, water and Red Bull. And when you take your break every 50 minutes, go in there and take a swig of water, a shot of Red Bull, and a couple crackers, do some jumping jacks, slap yourself in the face, whatever it is you got to do to get ready for the next 50 minutes, and then go back in there. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but try to use the restroom before you go in there. Keep in mind that when you're taking your exam, Prometric can't control everything, so it may be noisy. I took the foam earplugs in there with me because they do give you over-the-head earphones. The problem is if they're too tight on your head or if they're too loose, that's just an issue you don't need to deal with. So you can find them at any retail store such as Walmart or Meijer or Kmart, whatever. They're usually in the sporting goods sections by the guns, but you can buy them for pretty much $1 for 10 of them. When you're taking your exam, try to read each question twice. Answer that question in your head and then look at the answers that are given to you. If your answer is there, chances are it's correct. Only talk yourself out of your first choice if you know for a fact that the second choice is correct. So many times students change their answers from right to wrong. So go with your first choice unless you can prove otherwise. Keep in mind when you're answering questions that are all the above or none of the above, if you're certain that one of those statements is true, then don't choose none of the above. A lot of students will tell me, well, I knew it couldn't have been that one, so I went ahead and picked all the above. Well, if you knew it couldn't be, then why did you pick that it had to be? So if one of the choices is true, don't choose none of the above. If one of the statements is false, don't choose all the above. Keep in mind who wrote this exam. This exam was written by a bunch of PMPs. They don't want to make themselves look bad, so when you're answering questions, try to go for the one that has a positive spin. For example, this is a totally made-up question, but let's say that one of the questions says Bob came to work and Bob is really drunk. And by the way, if there's someone in this room right now named Bob, I'm not talking about you. It's another Bob. So Bob came to work and Bob's really drunk and you're the project manager, but you really need Bob. He's really playing a key role today in your project. So what do we do? A, put him in the break room, feed him coffee until he wakes up. B, fire Bob. C, lie and tell the board members that we have to reschedule because Bob didn't make it or something else. All those choices given to you are wrong. You need to look for the answer that says something about the project management plan because that's a positive answer. You don't know that giving them coffee is going to sober them up. You also aren't going to lie to your board members. And you're also not going to do anything else other than whatever's in the plan. Because PMI wants you to have thought these things out. And according to your human resources plan, that's where it's going to say if someone comes to work drunk today, this is how we're going to react. And it may actually say, put them in the break room and give them coffee. However, remember, keep a positive look on these test questions because they're written by PMI, a bunch of PMP people that they don't want to look bad in front of their brothers and sisters while they take the exam. And don't forget the old adage of it's too long to be wrong. So whenever you're looking for, if you don't know what the answer is, and there's one that's really long, the answer is really long, chances are it's that one. And the reason is when people write test questions, sometimes the answer has to be very long to make sure that someone can't argue their way out of it. So if you don't know which answer it is, an adage you could use is it's too long to be wrong. When you're done taking your exam and you're totally satisfied with what you're doing and you look up at the clock and it says that you still have 35 minutes, and by the way, most students say they get done between 2.5 hours and 3 hours and 15 minutes. So with that scenario, you have anywhere from an hour and a half to 45 minutes, and you're looking at the clock and you're wondering, am I really done? So one recommendation that I have is that you put a chart in front of you on your scratch paper that says Y, M, N. Y stands for yes, M stands for maybe, and N stands for no. And as you go through these questions and you find one that's kind of a maybe, you write that question number under the M column. So number 13 in M. So okay, so you do that at the very end of your exam. When you have time, go back to the ones in the maybe column. If it's in the yes column, you nailed it. You don't need to go back. If it's in the no column, that means you've never seen this information. You have no clue where in the world they pulled it out of. But if it's in the maybe, go back and look at those. And then also you may want to put, for example, test question 13, A, B. That means you're kind of 50-50 between A, B. You can't go back and look at them all. So just focus on the maybes. Once you have that, then you can make better use of your time. Once you're done with the exam, you're going to push submit. And then the computer's going to say, are you sure you're done? And then a little bit of speed of sweat will come out of your forehead and you'll think, yeah, I think I'm done. And then you push yes. And then all of a sudden your screen's going to change colors. It's either going to be blue, like the blue screen of death, or white, like a sheet of paper. What it's doing is it's grading your exam at that time. Once it's done, it's going to say, please take this exam. Excuse me, please take this survey. It's actually going to ask you for a survey before it tells you whether you passed or not. And it's going to be things like, was our people friendly and courteous? Was our bathrooms clean and inviting? Did you have a hard time getting into parking? That kind of ridiculousness just before you find out whether you passed or not. Once you find that out and you finish the survey, then you push submit on your survey, then you're going to get one of two responses. It's either going to say, congratulations, you've passed, you are a PMP as of right now, or it's going to say, sorry, you failed. If that happens, just relax. You can take it again within a year. You'll be fine. You could also get the third option. The third option, the mysterious option that comes back, and I've only seen one student get this. And they said, I'm sorry, we don't have enough information to grade your exam right now. We will let you know within 6 weeks whether or not you've passed. That did actually happen. So the only time that generally happens is when the test has been rewritten. And I just combed the PMI websites, and I'll keep this video current, but I just combed it to see if anything's changed, and nothing has changed. So you should be okay on that third one. So again, you passed, you didn't pass, or we'll let you know within 6 weeks. So as I said, once you pass your exam, the certification cycle begins. But one thing I didn't say in that previous slide was, relax. Just chill out. It's only an exam. They're not going to come and take your birthday away if you don't pass it. I only knew one person who had to pass it to get a job, and he had an incredible amount of pressure on him to pass this test, and he passed it the first time. So don't worry about it. Once you pass, you're a PMP right then and there. So once you pass the exam, you'll have to do some credential maintenance, just like we do for our ADCLPs. So let's look at that real quick. Just like we do for the government, you have to do professional development but they require 60 professional development hours every 3 years. So everything you're doing for DIWEA, such as our 80 hours, works. And they take anything. They take AFIT, DAU, whatever you got. You went and give a briefing, you prepared for a meeting, you held a seminar, you attended a seminar, all that is accepted just like they do for our 80 CLPs. Once you do your 60 CLPs, then you'll have to do credential renewals, which means that every 3 years you're going to have to do some stuff to keep your PMP. So let's take a look at that. In order to keep your certification, every 3 years you have to do those 60 PDUs, and also you have to pay them money, and that money changes, but it's about $150 every 3 years. And no, you don't have to be a member. If you're not a member, it's right around $200 every 3 years. So every 3 years, 60 PDUs, write them another check, and you're good for 3 more years. In the event you don't pay them and you let your 3 years lapse, then you go into what's called credential suspension. So let's take a quick peek at that. Once you hit your 36th month, then you will have to go and make sure you fulfill for your, you have to pay more money, take your 60 PDUs, and you're good. You have a 1 year grace period. So basically, as long as you do it before your 48th month, you'll be good to go. But if you let it lapse over 48 months, you're not just suspended, you're kicked off the club, off the island, and you're going to have to retake your test and do your application all over again. So students ask me, they say, well, Juan, I work for the government, I don't need your PMP anymore. Well, first of all, you may not need the PMP now, but when you need it, you can't go get it right away. So if you're a professional program manager or project manager, having a civilian certification is actually one step to being more professional. So consider keeping it once you have it. I have had a student come up to me 7 years after it expired, convinced all he had to do was pay his $150. And he was saddened to hear he had to reapply and pay the $555 all over again and do it from scratch again. So don't let that happen to you. And as I mentioned, after the 48th month, you're kicked off the club. But now your application expires. If for some reason you don't take your exam within a certain amount of time, you actually lose your application. You got to go do it again. So let's take a look at that. So your application expires 12 months after you pay for it, and your certification expires on your 48th month. So if you're going to take your exam, make sure that you take it within 12 months of paying for it. If you're going to keep your certification, make sure that you put it in your calendar that it expires every 3 years. And by the way, PMI will hound you with a bunch of emails, so they're going to remind you about 30,000 times within year 2 years and 10 months and between 3 and 4th year. So just don't forget, because it can be a real hassle to go get it again if you need it. So now you've seen what it takes to submit your application, walk through the process of doing an actual application. You've looked at what it means to have an application that's correct. We looked at the audit process. We talked about exam eligibility, certification cycles, maintenance in order to keep the certification, and what happens when it expires. Hopefully that will be of help to you when you take your PMP certification. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at yourpmpinstructor@gmail.com. Good luck in your test, and I stand to support any way I can. Thank you.